Hello and welcome back to the another episode of the Hindu News Analysis. Well, the date is 8th August 2025, and in this video we are going to discuss some important articles which are very much relevant for your preparation. So without any delay, let's start our discussion here by looking at the first article. Here the article is about the groundwater contamination as it is fueling chronic illness. So let's see, if you can remember, and if you would have watched my videos, we recently, a month ago, I guess, discussed the crisis in the groundwater. With respect to groundwater, especially in the South Indian states. We discussed that and we saw that how groundwater extraction is one of the issue there. But this article, it puts light on some different issue with respect to the groundwater. It talks about the contamination of the groundwater. So with respect to this, we need to get a proper analysis of it, how it is getting contaminated, what are the various chemicals which lead to the contamination of the groundwater, and what can be the outcomes of this contamination, and with respect to this, how India is regulating the groundwater. So for that, we need to rely on the data which is given by the Central Groundwater Board. So Central Groundwater Board. Well, how did this what does the Central Groundwater Board talk about it? Basically, the Central Groundwater Board, it comes under the Ministry of Jal Shakti, and it gives us the data with respect to the usage of groundwater in India. And it says that how important groundwater is, especially in the rural areas. According to this article, approximately 85% of the rural population are dependent on it for drinking purposes, and 65% of its population is dependent on groundwater for the irrigation purposes. So this is how important it is. But with respect to this groundwater, in this regard, we lack the regulatory actions. We don't have the specific bodies which would take care of it. So because of that, because if we look at the India with respect to the water, how water is controlled, how with respect to the laws with respect to water, we have the Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act 1974. What we have? We have Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act of 1974. So this act actually slightly addresses the groundwater. Because of this act, we have the Central Pollution Control Board, that it led the way for the Central Pollution Control Board and the State Pollution Control Board. These Central Pollution Control Board and State Pollution Control Board, they deal with the industrial waste and how it can be streamlined to the wells and and the streams, how it gives power to these boards to regulate the industrial drainage into streams and wells. But it has least application on the groundwater. If we look at the groundwater, the only authority which deals with the groundwater is the Central Groundwater Board, but it does not have the statutory backing as it comes under the Ministry of Jal Shakti. So here, this is little bit, with respect to the, laws which revolve around the water, which revolve around the water pollution in our country. So with respect to this, now the article highlights that even though we are looking how important it is for the drinking purpose for the people, how important it is for the irrigation, but at the same time, if we look at the status of groundwater in India, especially in the rural areas, it is getting highly polluted. There are various pollutants in this regard. For example, we are seeing the uranium pollutants, we are seeing contamination because of the nitrates, contamination because of the fluoride, contamination because of the arsenic, contamination because of uranium and various other heavy metals, which eventually leads to various dangerous diseases. For example, it can lead to the cancers, it can lead to various other such diseases. So with respect to this, this article in a way highlights the importance of the groundwater. It highlights that it is the time that we should regulate it properly. It should be given the statutory backing, and in this way we can, you know, make the lives secure for these rural people, rural India. So with this, let's see what were the key points. You know, this is the crux of this article, what it talks about. Now let's have a look at the key points in the article so that you will get the proper understanding of it. Here, what does the article talk about? Let's read it with me. Here, first it talks about the pervasive contamination. Groundwater in India, once considered pure, is now widely contaminated with various pollutants. According to the 2024 annual groundwater quality report by the Central Groundwater Board, shows that nitrates, fluoride, arsenic, uranium, and heavy metals exceed safe limits in numerous districts across the country, which we had discussed. These are the contaminants which lead to the pollution in the water, and eventually it can lead to the serious health consequences. For example, this contamination is linked to a national public health crisis. Specific health issues mentioned include the fluorosis, skeleton and dental from excessive fluoride. You know, we discussed that. Then cancer and neurological disorders from arsenic. We also discussed that blue baby syndrome from nitrate contamination, especially in infants. We discussed that orange damage from uranium. We also saw that how uranium is also one of the metal which contaminates it. And then developmental delays and other issues from heavy metals. So these are the various issues, these are the various contaminant elements which lead to the contamination of the groundwater. So let's see, now this article also highlights why these issues are prevailing in our country with respect to the groundwater. It is because of the systematic failure. The article attributes the persistence of the crisis to several industrial and policy failures. These include a fragmented regulatory system where agencies like this Central Groundwater Board and State Pollution Control Board works in isolation. You know, there is no synergy between the two. They work in isolation, and because of that, they are not able to check the groundwater that properly. Then also weak enforcement of existing laws, which emboldens polluters. There are weak existence, weak enforcement. Even though we have the laws, but they are not enforced properly. This is one of the drawback with respect to the Indian legislation. We are overburdened with the legislations, but when it comes to the enforcement, it is not done properly. Then also a lack of real-time public accessible data on water quality, meaning problem often go undetected until people fall ill. With respect to the data, we don't have the real-time data. Because of that, we can't guess what is the issue there. And once the people get ill, we come to know what were the reasons for that. We don't have the precautionary measures with respect to that. And also over extraction of groundwater, which concentrates existing pollutants and worsens the problem. That's also the issue which we had already discussed, how over extraction concentrates the existing pollutants and how it can worsen this problem furthermore. So this is what this article talks about. Now let me recap what we discussed. It talks about the the issue with groundwater. First, it also highlighted the dependence of the rural India on the groundwater, how much they are dependent, whether it would be the drinking purposes or for the irrigation purposes. Then we saw that there are various chemicals or various elements which lead to the contamination. For example, we saw because of the fluoride, we saw the chemicals like fluoride. We saw because of the nitrate, uranium, and various other heavy metals, maybe lead. It can lead to the psychological issues. So these are the various elements which led to this contamination. And what is the major reason for this? It is the failure, it is the systematic failure. First, we don't have the legislation, the proper legislation with respect to it, which would be directed towards the groundwater pollution. Second, if we have the legislations, there is issue with the existing laws. They are not enforced properly. Then also we don't have the real data by which we can track the issues. And then the over dependence on the groundwater, the over extraction of the groundwater, it also further leads to it. So this is what the article talks about. Now let's see what kind of question can be asked from this article. Here the question says, with reference to the groundwater contamination in India, consider the following statements. First statement, the Central Groundwater Board is a statutory body with the authority to enforce groundwater regulations. This is totally incorrect. It is not a statutory body, but it is it comes under the Ministry of Jal Shakti. So first statement is incorrect. Second, arsenic contamination is primarily concentrated in the Gangetic plains, including parts of West Bengal and Bihar. That's true. The over extraction of groundwater can worsen contamination by concentrating pollutants in the aquifers. That is also true. So with respect to this question, the correct statements are statement 2 and statement 3 only. And from the code given below, the correct code would be option B. With this, I hope you had understood the article. And now let's move to the another article. But before we will start the second article, I would like to give you the brief introduction about this initiative, which we had started from 2nd June 2025. Well, this initiative is about, the name of the initiative is Target IAS 2026. Under this initiative, every day we had promised you that we will upload 2 videos, one in the morning session where we will discuss the current affairs of yours, and this is the video where what we are doing right now, and the second video where we will discuss the static syllabus. And here we had promised you that by the month of January 2026 we are going to complete your full syllabus. Whatever is required for you to clear the exam, we'll cover that. And we started with Indian polity, which we covered. We started with then we took up the governance, and that also we covered these 2 subjects and the notes about these 2 subjects. And I told you that while we were delivering the lectures, we were also preparing books for you, and the book for the Indian polity and governance is available now. If you want to get access to it, you will have to mail us, and you will be told to pay 200 rupees. So this is the only payment which you can give us. And another thing about the book, it is very beautifully written. It contains various questions with respect to various, it contains different types of questions. In a way, after every concept which we had discussed, or after every topic which we had discussed there, we had brought the model, prelims as well as mains questions. If you want to get access to it, it is up to your discretion. Just mail us, and it will be available to you guys. And students had already started buying it. And if you want to be the part of it, please do subscribe the channel, do share it with your friends so that they may also get benefited. Now, after governance, I would like to mention we are going to start with the ancient history, and we will start the lectures from Monday. So it is about this initiative. Now let's move to the another article and let's have a look at it. Well, it talks about what Court's advisory opinion boosts, World Court's advisory opinion boosts climate action. What is this discussion about? We had, if you can remember, we had discussed similar articles with respect to the climate change, with respect to the common but differentiated principles with respect to the climate action. We had discussed these different articles. So what is the news here? What is the issue here? Basically, in the various countries, especially the developed countries, they approached the International Court of Justice, and they asked its opinion with respect to various issues with respect to climate action. For example, there is the issue: is it mandatory for the country to implement the nationally determined goals? Then the second question was about whether to how much we should restrict the global temperature. Is it 2 degrees centigrade or is it 1.5 degrees centigrade? Then the third question was with respect to what? The third question was with respect to the common but differentiated principle. Common but differentiated principle, that in this common but differentiated principle, it would be the responsibility of the developed countries to contribute more to the to the climate action, to provide the finances to the underdeveloping and developing countries so that they can also do great with respect to that. And the reason for that was that the developed countries, from the industrialization, they had emitted so much of greenhouse gases, and now it will not be fair if we are only making these developing and underdeveloped countries responsible for that. So it is the shared responsibility, and it would be dependent on the how much capability a country has, the respective capability of the country. According to that, they will have to contribute. So these questions were in front of the International Court of Justice, and eventually the International Court of Justice, it gave its advisory opinion with respect to these questions. First, it said that it is very much important that these nationally determined goals, they are very much important. They are very much important, and they should be brought in, and it should be very well recognized by the countries. Second, it talked about the limit of the temperature. It said that 1.5 degrees centigrade, it is still the limit, and the country should try to, it is the global warming target, the country should try to reinforce it and try to restrict the temperature within 1.5 degree centigrade. And then the third, with respect to the common but differentiated principle, the ICJ said that it is definitely the responsibility of whom? It is the responsibility of the countries. It is the responsibility of the developed countries to provide the finances for these developing and underdeveloped countries, so that both or everybody together can reduce the global temperature. So with respect to this, the article here highlights that how important this is. If we look at the opinion given by the International Court of Justice, even though it does not have any legal backing, looking at it, it does not have any legal backing, but still it is something which would be respected by the countries. We have the nationally determined goals. We had brought various laws with respect to that. So definitely, first of all, it is the domestic laws which would respect it. They will integrate these norms in their domestic laws. Then second, even though it does not, even though it is not mandatory, but still the countries would try to respect it, and eventually, it would lead to the restriction of the, global warming, or restriction of the, emissions of the carbon emissions. So this is what the article here actually highlights. Even though it does not have the advisory, it is not binding, but still it would be respected, and it would have the wide impact on the global temperature. So with this, let's have a look at the key points which were in the article. First of all, let's see what were given in the article. Legal obligations of the states. The International Court of Justice unanimously ruled that states have legally binding obligations to promote the climate. This goes beyond existing climate treaties and includes principles from general international law and the law of the sea. That is what we discussed. Then second, 1.5 degree centigrade as the legal threshold. The court interpreted the Paris Agreement's goal of pursuing efforts to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade as the definitive threshold that states must legally work towards. Then NDCs are binding. The court rejected the argument that a state nationally determined contributions are non-binding. It ruled that NDCs must reflect a state's highest possible ambition, and the state have a duty to due diligence to meet them. What are your nationally determined goals? It is not something you just give that, but you will not work on it. It is binding for you. Once you will view your nationally determined goals, then you should try to get that. Then the third, climate justice and common but differentiated principle with respect to capabilities. The opinion highlights that the principle of common but differentiated principle and respect to capabilities, it explicitly states that developed nations have a legally binding obligation to provide climate finance and technology transfers to the developing countries. Then what is beyond treaties, the ICJ, International Court of Justice, rejected the self-contained regime argument, meaning a country cannot withdraw from the climate treaties to escape its obligations. It also highlighted that, what does this point mean? That the countries, if they had signed any treaty, they cannot move away out of the treaty to avoid these obligations. It ruled that the duties to mitigate climate change also stem from customary international law and the environmental treaties. So this is what this article here talks about. Now let's see what kind of question can be asked from this article. Let's have a look at it. Here the question says, with reference to the International Court of Justice and its advisory opinions on climate change, consider the following statements. First, International Court of Justice advisory opinions are legally binding on all UN member states. This is totally incorrect. First statement is incorrect. We can eliminate option A, eliminate option C, eliminate option D. We are left with option B only, that is true only. So let's have a look at the second statement. The International Court of Justice has explicitly stated that 1.5 degree centigrade global warming limit is a legally binding threshold for states. That is true. Then the third, the principle of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities was explicitly rejected by the ICJ. This is totally incorrect. We discussed that. So with this, let's move to the another article and let's have a look at it. What does it talk about? Well, it is about is the Indian economy perfectly balanced? Recently the finance minister said that Indian economy is perfectly balanced, that we are seeing the GDP growth and at the same time we are restricting the inflation. So it is on the picture, it seems that it is perfectly balanced. But this article in a way rejects this claim of the finance minister. So let us try to find out what are the various points which are discussed, which are discussed in this article. The article highlights that the claim of the Goldilocks situation, where the finance minister said that there is growth and there is restricted inflation. But the situation is different. Why? Because the author says that indeed there is growth in our country. Indeed, the GDP is growing, but how it is growing, that is the different scenario. It is the rich, they are getting richer, and the income inequality is still there. Income inequality is still there, which is for that we have the Gini ratio. According to that, we have very huge income inequality in our country. Then second thing, it highlights that even though the inflation, if we look at the inflation, we had somehow controlled it. While we had controlled inflation, for example, the CPI, but with respect to the food inflation, we are not able to control the food inflation. The food inflation is still there. And the author also highlights that even though the pay scale of the employees that has increased, that had increased, but at the same time, this increase is very much nominal. It is not something real. They are not able to get more from it. That is what the article is highlighting. Even though the pay scale has increased, but it is something which is nominal. Rent wage growth has remained stagnant or even negative. This wage growth is, in a way, in real terms, it is either stagnant or even negative. So the author of this article, he in a way neglects the claims of the finance minister, which says that we had very Goldilocks situation. Our economy is growing and the inflation is under control. So with respect to this, let's have a look at the key points which were in the article. Here the article argues that there is flawed Goldilocks narrative. The protection of a perfectly balanced economy is based on misleading headline figures and ignores structural problems. So first, what does the author highlight? He talks about high food inflation. The consumer food price index has been volatile and significantly higher than the general consumer price index, severely eroding the purchasing power of the average household. That is true, which we discussed. Then we have the stagnant real wages. Despite increase in nominal salaries, real wage growth has been very low. This creates a silent squeeze on family budget, forcing them to cut back on spending and save less. So this is also we discussed. Then we have the growing inequality. The article points to a K-shaped economic growth. It also points out the K-shaped economic growth, where gains are evenly distributed, benefiting the wealthy while the majority struggle with this stagnant income. So this K-shaped economic growth, it is related to income inequality, where some get rich and some remain poor, in simpler terms, where there is income inequality. The Gini coefficient on taxable income may not fully capture this gap due to the large informal sector. Then also the fiscal challenge, the government's large fiscal deficit, which we have, the government's fiscal deficit and high public debt, which the government has, it can lead to the crowding out private investment and limit funds for crucial public services like healthcare and education. So these are some important points which were given in the article. Now with this, let us see what kind of question can be asked in the exam. Here the question says, with reference to the economic indicators in India, consider the following statements. First statement, the consumer food price index is a key component of the consumer price index. That is true. A high Gini coefficient indicates a more equitable distribution of income. No, a low Gini coefficient indicates a more equitable distribution of income. So second statement is incorrect. Third statement, a real wage growth is calculated by adjusting nominal wages for inflation. That is true. So with respect to this question, the correct statements are statement 1 and statement 3. So with this, the correct option is option C. Now let's move to the another article and let's see what it is about. Well, it's about mending ties. It is again, the article is about the Philippine President Mr. Marcos, who visited India, and within this visit we had elevated our relationship to this strategic partnership. So under in this visit, various agreements were signed. For example, we will contribute to the maritime partnerships, maritime exercises. Then also, we will put emphasis on the free trade agreement, a potential free trade agreement. Currently, if we look at the trade relation between India and Philippines, it is somehow around 3.3 billion, and there is definitely the huge potential between the two countries. So working on the preferential trade agreement. Then also, this if we look at how important the Philippines is for us, the Philippines is the first country for our BrahMos missiles. Philippines became the first country who borrowed it from us, who buyed it from us. So Philippines is the first destination country for our BrahMos missiles. And also there would be the defense corporation. We will focus on strengthening the military ties. Then then let's see what are the key points, what else was given in the article. Basically this is what the article was about. These were a few important points which this article had highlighted. So let's see. And also, if you can remember, in our recent class we also discussed that there would be the direct flights would start from India and Philippines. So let's see what are the key points given in the article. Here, first, strategic partnership. India and the Philippines have upgraded their relationship to a strategic partnership. An important development for the Philippines, as India is only its fifth such partner. For India, India would be the fifth strategic partner for them. Then we have the defense corporation. The two nations are strengthening their military ties. This is highlighted by India being the first export destination for the BrahMos missile. Not India being the first, it is Philippines being the first export destination for the missiles, BrahMos missiles. And Marcos Jr. expressed interest in purchasing more Indian military hardware. The two navies also conducted their first maritime exercise. Then India's stance on South China Sea. We also always respected the world order. India as a nation had always respected the world order, and it was the decision was given in the favor of Philippines. So we always want that it should be part of the Philippines, and we want there should be free navigation in this region, and this is what the Philippines too want. So there is definitely the thoughts meet there. Then we have the wider diplomatic message through this meeting. We gave the wider diplomatic message to the world. The visit serves as a broader diplomatic signal. It aims to mend India's strained relation with ASEAN following a Commerce minister's remarks, and demonstrates India's commitment to engaging with all Indo-Pacific countries, not just the Quad. So it shows that to the West that we are ready, especially the US right now when we are under the sanctions. Not kind of sanctions, but under the tariffs, which eventually is kind of a sanction, under secondary sanctions from USA. We are giving them the message where we are not ready to bow before you. We are not ready to align only towards your side, towards West, but it is our freedom. It is we as a country we will decide. This is the sovereign decision of us. And for as we know, the Ministry of External Affairs, he gave in his statement that this trade, it is the sovereign right of a country, and it is up to us with whom we want to trade. So we are giving this message to the world that we will not bend towards any force. Then we have the economic ties also. While current bilateral trade is substantially low, which is 3.3 billion, investments are growing. The two countries are considering a preferential trade agreement and have signed an agreement to improve travel and connectivity that we had discussed. So with this, I hope you had got the holistic understanding of this visit from the President Marcos Jr. to India. So with this, let's see what kind of question can be asked in the exam. Here the question says, with reference to India's foreign policy and regional engagement, consider the following statement. The BrahMos missile is a joint venture between India and Russia. That is true. Second, the Act East policy succeeds the locust for. Basically, it is true and very simple question. Then the third statement, India is a member of the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. No, India is not a member of APEC Forum. So with this, the correct answer is only statement A. With this, I hope you had understood the article. Now let's move to the another article and see what does it talk about. Well, it talks about the understanding the prophylaxis, the gold standard treatment in hemophilia care. So what is the issue with respect to this? Basically the hemophilia, how traditionally hemophilia is treated. If we look at that, in India we focus much on the consequences we focus much on the symptoms than the disease itself. Our approach is not preventive in nature. We only treat the hemophilia. We only come to know about the hemophilia when there is bleeding and when there is unstopped bleeding. Then only we start treating it. We are not taking the taking the preventive approach with respect to that. So this is the traditionally what we had followed. And if we look in India, the data with respect to hemophilia, it is according to this article only 20% of hemophilia cases in India. We had only we had only noted out 20% of hemophilia cases in our country, and we know that in our country hemophilia is one of the major issue. Then this article talks about there is not this it is not the only solution by which we can treat once there would be cut. Once there would be cut because of what happens in hemophilia. If there is a cut, there would be the unstopped bleeding, and the blood clotting will not happen quickly. Usually blood will clot quickly if there is any cut, but for the hemophilia patients, blood clotting is very much delayed. So with respect to this, the article talks about it is not we should not only focus on the aftermath of the cut, but what we should focus on, we should focus on the prophylaxis, which is we should focus on that. Why should there be cut? Why should be there bleed? Why bleeding should be there? Our approach should be why bleeding should be there and why there should be these cuts. So this is what this article in a way, in nutshell, talks about. Now let's have a look at the key points which we can draw from this article. First, in India, undiagnosed cases in India, only 20% of these estimated hemophilia cases in India have been diagnosed, leaving a large number of patients at risk of life-threatening bleeds and permanent disabilities. This is due to lack of awareness and limited diagnostic facilities that we had discussed. Then we have this shift in treatment philosophy. Hemophilia care has shifted from a reactive approach on demand therapy to a proactive preventive one, which is prophylaxis. On demand therapy treats bleeds after they happen, while prophylaxis aims to prevent them entirely. This is what we discussed. Then we have the advantage of prophylaxis. The preventive method is considered the gold standard because it prevents irreversible joint damage and long-term disability. That is true, which we did not discuss, but we can highlight this now. Then we have significantly enhances patients' quality of life, allowing them to lead more active lives and reduce school or work absenteeism. So this is also when you suffer from hemophilia, and it eventually impacts the quality of the life. You are not allowed to go to school that much. You would often stay out from the school or out from the work. You will try to restrict yourself, so that you would often fear. It is also the psychological burden which a person faces in this time. Then also it reduces the overall burden on healthcare system by lowering the needs of emergency care and long-term treatment for complications. Then what is the global versus Indian context? While approximately 90% of hemophilia patients in developed countries receive prophylaxis, which is this on demand, while as on demand therapy remains the dominant treatment in India, with only few states starting to offer prophylaxis to children. So in the world, usually in the developed countries, it is the prophylaxis which is followed, and in India mostly it is on demand therapy. Once there will be cut, then there will be the therapy. So this is what this article talks about. These are the points which were highlighted in the article. Now let's see what kind of question can be asked from this article. Here the question says, with reference to hemophilia, consider the following statements. First, hemophilia is a congenital disorder that leads to excessive bleeding due to the absence of the certain clotting factors. That is true. Second, the prophylaxis method of treatment involves administering clotting factors only after bleed has occurred. That is totally incorrect. It is before bleeding, as we had discussed. Then the third statement, the disease is almost exclusively prevalent in males. That is true because it is linked to XX chromosomes, and for the male it is XY chromosome. No, this is incorrect. It is to females. It is limited to only females. So with respect to this, which of the statement given above is or correct? It is statement 1 only. With this, let's move to the last question, last article of today's discussion. Well, there was this picture of the tutu kadi, to Kadi district in Tamil Nadu. Well, even though if you look at the picture, there is nothing great about it. Well, this only talks about how these uneven rains can impact the salt production in these areas in Tamil Nadu, especially in these areas, because they cannot meet the target. So how it is important for your preparation? Well, if you will ask me, it is very much important. UPSC, it works differently. Once I remember in 2023, I guess, they asked the question about the squirrel. So don't underestimate the UPSC. They can ask you a question about the salt production in India. So let's see how question can be framed, inspired from this article. We can say inspired from this article, from this picture. The question says, with reference to salt production in India, consider the following statements. India is the second largest producer of salt in the world. That is true after China. Then Gujarat accounts for more than 75% of country's total salt production. That is also true. That primary method of salt production in India is the mining of rock salt. No, it is melting of actually the seawater, or we can evaporation of seawater, or whatever the process is done there. So with respect to this question, the correct statements are statement 1 and 2 only, and the option would be option B. With this, we had completed our today's discussion. I hope you would have liked the video. I hope you would share it with your friends, and I definitely hope you would subscribe the channel. Thank you for staying with me. Thank you very much, and please do write in the comments, because your comments are very valuable for me. Write about what else should we bring, how I can change my teaching style. I'm open to any discussion. I'm open to any opinion, and what else should we bring for you guys. Also to mention that this initiative is for you. This whole hard work which we do, it is only about you guys. Now please do look into this matter. Do subscribe if we are doing great. Do appreciate us. If I'm not doing that great, do suggest the changes which I should bring in. So with this, thank you for staying with me. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.